The first people who saw Pretty in Pink hated it, which left John Hughes scrambling to come up with a fix. And he then got one day to change the entire movie. Pretty in Pink turns 40 years old this month, so here are some things I bet you never knew about it. The story behind Pretty in Pink starts in Muswell Hill in North London in the late 70s, because that's when and where Richard Butler, lead singer of the band The Psychedelic Furs, first got the idea for the song Pretty in Pink off their 1981 album Talk, Talk, Talk. The song was a modest hit, peaking at number 43 on the UK charts in 1981. But you know who loved it? Molly Ringwald, and she introduced the song to writer-director John Hughes. Hughes and Ringwald had just made 16 Candles together in 1984, and so Hughes, who was mostly inspired by the song's title, set out to write a movie called Pretty in Pink intentionally for Molly Ringwald. According to Ringwald, he wrote it after they made 16 Candles, but before they made The Breakfast Club, which shot in 1984 and then came out in 1985. Pretty in Pink, the song, is about a young woman who sleeps around and feels unfulfilled. Hughes instead wrote it as a high school story examining social strata among teens. It was about a girl from the wrong side of the tracks, Andy, who was caught between her loving nerdy friend Ducky and a popular rich boy named Blaine. And it should be noted here, in Hughes' original script, Andy ended up with Ducky at the end of the film. John Hughes was extremely busy in 1984 and 1985. Besides The Breakfast Club, he also wrote and directed Weird Science and Ferris Bueller in that time. So, for Pretty in Pink, Hughes brought on producer Lauren Schuler Donner, whom he had worked with on Mr. Mom in 1983. And they got the film set up at Paramount, which also produced Ferris Bueller. But because Hughes was so busy in this period, he decided to let someone else direct Pretty in Pink. Howard Deutsch was a music video director at the time. He had met Hughes because he directed a music video connected to 16 Candles in 1984. So Hughes approached Deutsch about directing Pretty in Pink. And Deutsch was hesitant at first because he had never made a feature. Hughes told him, all you have to do is get those performances for me and you can do it. So Howard Deutsch agreed to direct the movie, and then it was time to find the cast. You'd think that because Hughes wrote it for Molly Ringwald, she'd be Andy by default. But Paramount actually didn't initially want her in the role, and Ringwald was hesitant because she had just made 2 high school movies and she wanted to move on to other things. And so Paramount made Deutsch consider a number of other actors, including Jennifer Beals, Jodie Foster, Sarah Jessica Parker, Tatum O'Neal, and Lori Loughlin. Deutsch told Variety in 2021 that he begged and groveled for Molly Ringwald to play Andy. He told her, I need you to do it because this is my first movie and I don't know what I'm doing and it should be you. Ringwald said she'd think about it and then ultimately agreed to take the role. While speaking to Vogue in 2021, Molly Ringwald didn't hint at any hesitation, saying, quote, I like that Andy was so different from the character I had just played in The Breakfast Club. I loved the script for Pretty in Pink and I really enjoyed working with John, so it just felt like the right time for me to play a character like Andy that was closer to who I actually was. Plus, there's something really flattering about someone writing a script for you. Charlie Sheen was then considered for the role of Blaine, but Molly Ringwald lobbied Hughes and Deutsch to cast Andrew McCarthy instead. Ringwald said Andrew was cute with a sort of bookish quality. He didn't come off like some typical jock. He seemed like the kind of guy that Andy would have been into because Andy wasn't that different from me and I thought Andrew was really cute. We read with a bunch of different people, but even from his first audition, we just knew he was Blaine. Anthony Michael Hall was then offered the role of Ducky first, but he turned it down because he didn't want to be typecast. Hughes and Deutsch then considered Michael J. Fox, but he couldn't do it because of Back to the Future. Molly Ringwald thought Robert Downey Jr. would have been perfect for Ducky, but then Hughes and Deutsch went with John Cryer instead. As far as cameos go, the movie includes some recognizable names in smaller parts. Andrew Dice Clay played the bouncer, Christy Swanson appears as Duckette, and Gina Gershon was Trombley. The film's production designers borrowed a lot from Molly Ringwald's real life. She told Vogue, Andy's room was basically modeled after my own. The prop people even took a collage from my personal bedroom and used it in the movie for Andy's room. Ringwald also worked with costume designer Marilyn Vance to incorporate her personal style. Quote, everything Andy wears was sourced from vintage stores in LA, and that was very much the way I shopped at the time. I definitely think the film had an impact in that teens started dressing in more vintage outfits and in more layers. But there was one costume Ringwald absolutely hated. I really loved everything Marilyn did except the prom dress. In 2017, Molly Ringwald wrote a piece for Teen Vogue talking about the prom dress, explaining that she did sign off on its design, swayed by Vance's enthusiasm, but when she tried it on at a costume fitting, she burst into tears. She hated the color and the shape, but at that point they had made multiple copies, so there was nothing she could do about it. Ringwald wrote, if I had had my way, I would have burned the dress when filming Wrapped. It's a good thing she didn't do that because they ended up needing it again for reshoots, but a little bit more about that in a bit. Ringwald said years later she eventually came to appreciate the dress for being memorable and unique. She said she kept all of the clothes from the film except for the prom dress, and now she wishes she kept it and had it framed because it's so iconic. Paramount set the movie's budget at $9 million, and Pretty in Pink started filming in May of 1985. Like Hughes' other teen movies, the film is set in the suburbs of Chicago, but unlike many of those films, it shot entirely in Los Angeles. At John Marshall High School, John Burroughs Middle School, Andy's house is on Hope Street in South Pasadena, and they filmed the prom at the Millennium Biltmore Hotel's Crystal Ballroom. Howard Deutsch recalled tension on set between the actors. He said Molly, 17, had a crush on Andrew, who was 20, but Andrew didn't like her back, so there was some resentment there. But Ringwald disputes this story, saying they both were crushing on each other and there was no tension between them. John Cryer, on the other hand, has spoken at length about how he felt like an energetic weirdo and the odd man out on set. Cryer said, "I think they were irritated by me from day one," and he recalled specific tension with Andrew McCarthy. Pretty in Pink wrapped production by the end of June 1985 after just 2 months. But then things got complicated. In the fall of 1985, Hughes and Deutsch put together a rough cut of the film and they screened it for an early test audience. Deutsch told NRG in 2023, the audience loved the movie for most of its runtime and, quote, the test screening had been like a rock concert. But then we got to the ending and they started to boo. You see, in that version, the movie ended with Blaine coming to prom with a different girl, and so Andy picks Ducky and they have a big romantic dance scene. And test audiences absolutely hated that Andy didn't end up with Blaine. Producer Lauren Schuler Donner said 65% of the audience said they wanted her to be with Blaine. After the screening, Donner and Paramount didn't want to change the ending, but Hughes and Deutsch knew they needed to give the audience what they wanted. They weren't sure how it would work, but then they realized Blaine could come to prom alone, and then Ducky could sacrifice himself and tell her to go be with him. Ducky then gets a little moment where Christy Swanson shows an interest in him. Paramount gave them 1 day to create the prom scene and shoot the new ending. Oh, and also to make matters worse, Andrew McCarthy had shaved his head for a role on Broadway, so they had to put him in a really bad-looking wig. They also needed a new song for the ending. They had originally commissioned Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark, OMD, to write Goddess of Love. But that song no longer fit this new ending, so Hughes asked them to write a new track. The band was about to go out on tour and had just 1 day to do it, so they came up with the now legendary song, If You Leave. The original ending of Pretty in Pink has been lost to time. No one besides the filmmakers and the test audience have ever seen it. It's never been featured on a DVD as a deleted scene, and Paramount says they have no archive of it. Pretty in Pink then premiered on January 29th at the Chinese Theater in LA, before opening on 827 screens on February 28th. It did $6 million opening weekend, landing at number 1, and then it went on to gross $40 million total, more than 4 times its budget. Reviews were mixed to good. Today, 76% of the 55 reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes are positive. The soundtrack was a smash hit. It was released the same day as the film, and it went gold within 2 months. It peaked at number 5 on the Billboard 200 album chart, and If You Leave, meanwhile, hit number 4 on the Hot 100 singles chart. And in 2013, Rolling Stone named the album the 11th greatest movie soundtrack of all time. Pretty in Pink was not nominated for any major awards, but it continues to have a strong legacy as one of the best teen movies from the 1980s. One big question that lingers 40 years later, is Ducky gay? Molly Ringwald has said in recent interviews she believes that he is, and that he just hasn't come to terms with it yet. And she said, quote, the character was based on my best friend, Matt Freeman, who ended up coming out later in life. But Cryer and Howard Deutsch disagreed, saying they didn't intend it that way. When asked why the movie has lasted, Molly Ringwald told Vogue, I think it's because all the issues John wrote about are still the same. Kids have to go to school and navigate these various cliques while feeling othered, and that hasn't changed. Teens have to navigate that while figuring out who they are, and I feel like there haven't been enough movies that speak to that experience in a real way. That's why something like Pretty in Pink is still so special. Thanks for watching this video. If you've made it to the end, tell me if you're Team Blaine or Team Ducky. For more movie histories, check out the attached playlist and subscribe to my newsletter for the latest movie news.